Hey everybody, Susan Morgan Taylor here with you again for the Art of Connection series. So today I want to share with you a little known but extremely powerful and effective communication hack that can turn conflict into connection instantaneously when you become a ninja master at actually using this tool. I love this tool because it's so simple and it's easy to remember. It's called the XYZ statement. XYZ statements are especially useful in situations where you're trying to communicate something to your partner, but you just feel like you keep hitting resistance or like they're not really open to hearing you. And a lot of times why that happens in the first place is because we're coming at the other person with a lot of blame. We don't realize it. It can be really subtle. What XYZ statements do is they put all the power back in our hands. It's a way to really take our power back so that we can communicate in a way that our partner can actually hear us. So XYZ statements, the X in the XYZ stands for something that's observable, something that you can see, hear, taste, or touch. It is not subjective. So it's something that if you were a witness on a witness stand in a court of law, that you could literally testify to having seen it, heard it, tasted it, touched it, actually experienced it objectively. So X is something, again, that's objective. It's an objective behavior that could be observed by potentially 5 or 6 or 10 other people at one time. A subjective description is something that is much more personal to us. And what we tend to do a lot of times when we're quote unquote communicating is we're coming at the other person with really subjective opinions of what we believe happened rather than an objective statement of what we can actually observe in the moment. So the X of the XYZ is just that. It's the objective evidence, so to speak, of what can actually be objectively described. And I'll give you an example of one of these in just a minute. The Y of an XYZ statement is the feel. Now that's the more subjective piece. So when X happened, when I observed X, I felt Y. So that's where we can start to bring in our subjective feeling of how that actual behavior impacted us subjectively. That's the Y of an XYZ statement. And the Z of an XYZ statement is the thing that we really want or desire or wish we could experience instead of what we actually experience. So it can sound something like, when you got up and walked out of the room, I felt ignored. And what I want is to feel connected. So that was an XYZ statement. Very, very simple. So X, Y, Z, where X, as you can tell in that example, X is really what I could actually observe. And when we own the feeling with the I feel statement, the feeling is subjective, but it's also ours. It's our experience. And so that also cannot be fucked with because it's literally our personal interpretation. And then the Z is just the expression of the desire, the thing that we actually really want. So the beauty and the magic of the XYZ statements are that they truly bring the power back in our hands. And it makes it very, very difficult for the other person to argue with us because we're coming at it from just the pure observable facts. The subjective feelings, when I can really own my feelings as my own, it's not that they're right or they're wrong, but they're my feelings. You cannot argue with how I feel. And then just the desire, the expression of desire, the thing that I genuinely want. What this does, it can take the defenses down off the other person and create a setting where there's more of an invitation for connection rather than having one person feel like they're being attacked by the other, which is so often what happens when communication goes south in relationships. Now, where a lot of people go wrong and why we hit those roadblocks sometimes when it comes to communication, for example, how to do an XYZ statement incorrectly would be like, when you abandoned me, I felt that you didn't want to be around me, you didn't like me, and what I want is for you to be nicer to me. This is the way not to do an XYZ statement, and part of the problem with that example that I just gave you is that it's not at all about bringing the power back into your own hands. In that languaging, it's all about subjective experience and blaming the other person and needing that other person to become something different, which always that's going to put somebody else usually on high defense, and they're not going to be available to listen or to really have empathy. So part of the mastery of communication, I like to call these like the ninja communication tools, that when you master them, you're like a ninja communication master, and you really truly have the power to turn conflict into connection in an instant. But what is so hard about actually implementing these techniques is that often when we're triggered, we're in the wrong part of our brain. We are not in our prefrontal cortex. That's the part of our brain that can really develop empathy. It can take another person's perspective. We can kind of get out of our own stuff to really hear another person. We are not in that part of our brain usually when we're in conflict and relationship. We're in our hindbrain, which is our limbic brain. That's the part of the brain that wants to defend. It's the fight, flight, survival brain that sees the other person as the enemy. So the hack here, if you really want to master this, is really learning how to take yourself from that activated state of being in the limbic or hindbrain and how to make a conscious choice to sort of quiet that down and be willing to take ownership for your own experience. And the XYZ statements are a beautiful way to do that because they don't blame anybody else. They describe observable behavior, things that any 5 other people in the room could also witness at the same time, while also owning your feelings, the way that behavior impacted you. That's the why of the XYZ. Somebody else really cannot argue with that because that's your subjective experience, which is totally valid if you present it properly, if you say it in the way that it can actually be heard in that way without blaming the other person. And then the Z is really the what I really want is. And if we do that correctly, it's never about really asking the other person to change or become somebody different. That's how to do it wrong. How we do the Z part correctly is just expressing our desire of what we truly genuinely want. So X, Y, Z. Be sure to like and subscribe and drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about the XYZ statements. And I'll see you back here pretty soon for another episode of the Art of Connection series.